you amazing people? Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. So excited to see all of you today. I always have to hit all the buttons for the AI note takers to approve those so I don't have a block in the middle of my screen. There we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We've got a lot to talk about today. This is one of my favorite topics. Before we get into that, a couple of things. Number one, an announcement on My Freed Life in Charlotte at the end of the month. The region has asked us to reschedule that. So we did, and it will be in January. I do not know the date on that yet. We are gunning for the third week of January. It will not be during a time that obviously interrupts the Chiefs playoff run. So I'll make sure for those of you that are Chiefs fans to be mindful of that. And I know that there were a few of you that were disappointed by that. We believe that we'll have a bigger crowd, make a bigger impact when we're not dealing with kids going back to school, middle of the summer, people coming back from mega agent camp. So we made the executive decision to reschedule to January, and we will let you know once we have the date for that. Just so you are aware, for the rest of August, I know next week many of you are going to be at mega agent camp. I will not be there this year because I'm going to go home and hang out with my dad. So we will be here next week. For those of you who will be joining us, we're going to be covering the habits of happiness. And happiness is a topic that I love to talk about because it doesn't come natural to me. I don't know about a lot of you, but happiness is something that I must practice. It doesn't just come natural. And so I do believe that there are certain little habits and focuses and insights that you can put into your day-to-day life to make yourself more happy. And that's what I want to cover with you next week when we're back here. Then on the 21st, we're going to turn your inner critic into an inner coach. That's going to be all about the story you tell to yourself about yourself when you're by yourself, which, as many of you know, we at My Freed Life call your personal podcast. We're going to be talking about your personal podcast on the 21st. And how do we make that podcast one that brings out the best in you, that creates the best version of you? So make sure that you're with us. And then on the 28th, we have a special guest. We're working on this one, and I think it's going to be really amazing. So that's the rundown for Wellness Wednesday in the month of August. So make sure that you've got that on your schedules. We'll be here Wednesday, 9 o'clock Central Time. This week, I'm getting into, as I mentioned, one of my all-time favorite topics, which is your own personal BS. Now, when I say BS, I don't mean what you might think I mean. I believe BS is behaviors and stories. Behaviors and stories. Now, I want to share something with you that I shared with a coaching client of mine yesterday. Her name is Brittany Winnery. Brittany is one of my all-time favorite people. She has a massive heart. She is also a party waiting for a place to happen. She's one of those people that if you send her a text message, before you send it, you have to kind of edit it and make sure that there are enough hugging and heart emojis in that text message for Brittany, because that's just who she is. She's a ray of sunshine. And so I was having this conversation with her yesterday, and we were talking about, practicing mindfulness. We were talking about how we as human beings can navigate this circumstance that we call life and do it from a perspective that brings out the best in us. And I shared with her, I said, I think it boils down to what we call the 3 M's. And so I would invite you all to write this down. You've heard it from me before, but maybe not organized in this way. But the 3 M's first, and this is the one we're going to talk about today, is metacognition. Metacognition. Now, I'll share my screen with you real quick so that you can see this. Metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's thought processes. It's the awareness and understanding of one's thought processes. So write that down. I'm going to come back to it, okay? The second one, second M, is mental hygiene. Having a system to practice mental hygiene. Because as you who are faithful My Freed Life followers and faithful Wellness Wednesday attenders know, mental health is a byproduct of mental hygiene. And so we all want to engineer our practices around mental hygiene. And you know this about us in our team, we are anti-guru here. And what I mean by anti-guru, gurus are people, and you'll see this in a lot of different coaching spaces. They're the people who find a way and claim it as the way. I personally can't stand that because I think different people, different experiences, different seasons of life want different things. And so when I talk about mental hygiene, I don't think about it through the lens of a guru where I tell you, do these things and you will feel mental health. I want you to engineer your own mental hygiene program, the one that works for you. And that might take a little bit of trial and error, and it might take a little bit of patience until you figure out what it is for you. Last one, medicine cabinet of the mind. Medicine cabinet of the mind. And the medicine cabinet of the mind is the place that you go when you inevitably find yourself mentally or emotionally hijacked. When you know I'm off kilter, I need to get back, right? Even into just being neutral to the experience of life. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today if you don't know what that means. But having 2 to 3 things that you have in your hip pocket, that if you find yourself in moments of stress and moments of overwhelm, that you have a pre-decided plan that you are going to go to. I'll tell you mine, and I was practicing this. I was really frustrated last week because we went on vacation. I really just needed a place to like clear my head. And my youngest daughter got really, really sick. And I just was in that space of like, God, like I was so disappointed. And it was all kind of building. And the thing that I go to first, and the thing that typically works, I'd say 80 to 85% of the time, box breathing. Box breathing. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. I first learned about it from a Navy SEAL that I decided to go camping in the woods with. I don't recommend that. But box breathing is something that I find is the first go-to for me in the medicine cabinet of the mind. And the reason that I brought up Brittany is that yesterday I was sharing this with her, and I said, if you think of these 3 things as if they exist in a cycle, that if you were to put metacognition, which feeds mental hygiene, which creates the medicine cabinet of the mind, if you were to think of that as a cycle, in the middle of it, there's a 4th M. And Laura Hyatt loves it when I do this, when I make everything start with the same letter. She thinks it's brilliant. But in the middle is the 4th M, and I want you to write this down: mastery. It's self-mastery. And I share that with you because I get really tired of coaches and authors and people who throw out these esoteric ideas and then they don't give you any like meat and potatoes. They don't pull it out of the clouds, put it into the dirt, and help you actually practice what that is. And so this idea of self-mastery is oftentimes one that it's like, well, what is self-mastery? And the answer is mastery of yourself. And it's like, well, great, but what does that mean? And I can confidently look you in the eye today that if you ask me, what is self-mastery, I would say it is the practice of metacognition, mental hygiene, and having a medicine cabinet of the mind. And today we're going to talk about metacognition, and that's what personal BS is all about. Now, as I mentioned, the definition of metacognition is the awareness and understanding of one's thought processes. And I absolutely love this quote. This is the quote that we live and die by in the My Free Life program. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now, when I think about the unconscious, and the way that we refer to it is programming. And we are habitual by nature. Whatever you repeat, whatever thought process, whatever behavior you repeat, your mind, the software of your mind, will seek to automate because it's always looking to conserve energy. The challenge that you have is that your human mind is probably the most sophisticated thing on the planet. It's unbelievably sophisticated, but it's also unbelievably stupid. And what I mean by unbelievably stupid is that it will just as easily automate a thought process or behavior that is destructive as it will one that is constructive. And this is how people get addicted to things like cigarettes and vaping and alcohol and binge watching things that aren't good for them. And so as it relates to programming, I'm always looking for stories and insights and analogies and metaphors that explain this idea of programming so that people and myself deeply understand it. And today I just want to read a passage to you from a book called Untamed. This is from Glennon Doyle. The first 150 pages of this book are some of the best literature that I have ever read. And the reason for that is that she is extremely vulnerable. If you're a person that finds yourself easily offended, just so you know, probably not for you. That book is probably not for you. By the way, if you're somebody that finds yourself constantly and easily offended, that is a byproduct of thinking you're more important than you really are. Sorry to punch you in the throat there, but those that walk around like, oh, that offends me, that you just have a heightened sense of self-importance, just so you know. But from the book, here's what I want you to hear. I'm going to say this slowly, and we'll put this in the Facebook group today in case you don't have the ability to write this all down. It says, we are like computers, and our beliefs are the software with which we are programmed. Often our beliefs are programmed into us without our knowledge by our culture, community, religion, and even family. Though we don't choose these subconscious programs, they run our lives. They control our decisions, perspectives, feelings, and interactions. So they determine our destiny. What we believe, we become. There is nothing more important than unearthing what we really believe to be true about ourselves and the world. So I'm curious, my Freed Life community, in the chat box, just pop in there real quick. What's one thing that stood out to you about that passage? And while you're doing that, the one that really gets me is that last sentence. There is nothing more important than unearthing what we really believe to be true about ourselves and our world. So if something popped out to you, put it into the chat box. But what I learned in coaching people, and this is the thing that when I train coaches, I am never endingly pounding into their head. Most of what your people experience as obstacles are simply symptoms. Most of what your people experience as obstacles are simply symptoms. Symptoms of what? Programming. See, there are these invisible forces that guide every decision. They create your reality. In fact, many of you are familiar with the RAS, the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system is what I call the great filter to the world. It is your filter through which determines what you notice and what you don't. And the work that they've done on the reticular activating system has determined that at any given time that you're awake, there are over 2 million bits of information that are available to you through your 5 senses. But your great filter is going to take that 2 million bits of information and compile it down to just 126. And that 126, the things that you notice, are your reality. And this is why you can have two people in the exact same position, witness the same circumstance, and have completely different stories as to what happened. And the thing that I'm always interested in coaching myself and other people is, what are the 126 bits that this person's RAS filters in and filters out? Because that is your reality, right? And so if we're going to create a life of choice and freedom, then we have to have an unearthing system. Said another way, when we're looking at this quote right here, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How do we make the unconscious conscious? How do we unearth what is hidden or programmed inside of us that's making so many of our decisions? How do we do that? Well, metacognition in practice is done through this cycle, the observation and examination. Observation and examination. Now, I absolutely love this quote too. Perhaps it's time for you to take a temporary break from pursuing goals to find the knot in the garden hose that once removed will make everything better and easier. It's incredible what can happen when you stop driving with the emergency brake on. See, when I coach somebody, that's one of the first things that I look to do. This is a Ferrari stuck in second gear. How do I get the emergency brake off? And for a lot of you, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to get top speed with your emergency brake on. This is the work that you need to slow down and do. And so it begs a question: observation and examination of what? What is it that we actually observe and examine to unearth our unconscious programs? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. In fact, in my Freed Life, we teach like 6 different things. Today, I just want to share 2. The first one are your behaviors. Your behaviors. Now, there's an exercise that I use often in coaching, and many of you are probably familiar with it. It's called the 3 chairs exercise, but I do it internally with people, with themselves, not externally with others. And what's interesting, there's a video that Laura Wassinger, who's our director of operations, every year this thing finds its way back into our lives somehow. And it's one of the original bad lip reading video or bad lip syncing videos from the NFL. This thing's like 10 years old. And there's this one video. It's Adrian Peterson, and he's like, I want cake now. And you might be wondering, what is this guy talking about? Well, I'm about to share with you. Have you ever noticed inside of you that there's a conversation between your parts? And I have a kid inside of me that loves cake. Like, I have a kid in me that says, man, I want cake, or I want a cinnamon roll, right? And then I have this other part of me that's like, hey, man, no, you don't. Don't eat that, right? Let's get rid of the dad bod. Let's eat healthy. And so we have these parts that get into conflict with ourselves. Some of you might experience this in your business. You know, I need to get up and lead generate today. But then there's this other part of you, no, let's not do that. Let's focus on this. And so you live in this almost argument or conversation between different parts of you. We've all had this experience, right? But when you think about it in the terms of the 3 chairs, if you think of those 2 parts as if they're just sitting across the table looking at each other, chair 1, chair 2, they're having a conversation. Eat the cinnamon roll, don't eat the cinnamon roll. But there's a 3rd chair. And the 3rd chair exists in each and every one of you. And it is the first step to a life of spirituality. The 3rd chair is the chair that observes this entire conversation. Have you ever noticed that you can hear the conversation inside of yourself? I share this with people in my Freed Life. If you've ever driven into a parking lot and your music is up too loud and you have to turn the music down because there's people everywhere and you're looking for a spot, and you've ever said to yourself or said to another person, I've got to turn this down. I can't hear myself think. Well, you hear yourself think. What that means is there's a conversation between parts, 1st chair, 2nd chair. But then there's also something or someone that is observing that conversation. Who is that? And that is the quiet consciousness, the awareness that sits behind all of this. And see, when you get into that space of, I'm not in 1st chair or 2nd chair, I'm the one observing the conversation. Well, now we put a little time and distance in between those parts. Now you are in a position that you can observe and examine these parts of you. And so, for example, the part of you that wants a cinnamon roll, what's that about? What is it about that makes you want that right now? And see, what I'm looking for you to do is non-judgmental observance. If you're not really good at this yet, that's okay. All you're looking to do is just observe and examine the conversation that's happening inside of you. Now, if you want to know what step 2 is, think of it like this. You're observing and examining these two parts of you that are in conflict with each other. Go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. You said you were going to go. I'm tired, right? You're just observing that. And if you want to know how to practice true spirituality, true presence, all you have to do is simply ask those parts of you, what are you going to say next? What are you going to say next? Now, when you do that from the third chair, what happens? They both stop talking. See, this is creating space. And from there, you have one of the greatest freedoms ever, which is to engineer your own thought process. Now, thought processes are engineered through two things: asking questions and answering them. Now, one of the questions that I like to ask myself, and I think lends to really smart or good decision making, is what would the hero version of myself do right now? Would the hero version of myself eat the cinnamon roll or not? No. Okay. Well, I'm going to go with that. And yet, where most people struggle is they never get into the third chair. They never observe and examine their behaviors and stories from a place of non-judgmental observation. And that is the first step. And so the more you do this, the more freedom of choice you create. And you start to get to a point where you're like, well, where did cinnamon roll boy come from? Like, what's this all about? What is this part of me that is always keeping me from following through on the gym? And see, if you want to know, like, what's the question that you can ask that part of you? And I know that this seems a little crazy. Like, does Jordan spend a lot of time talking to himself? Yeah. In fact, I tell the team we could never work in the same office because of how often I talk to myself. Plus, I practice Ninja Turtles by myself a lot. I don't know if any of you do that, but practicing Ninja Turtles is something I do a lot. Shredder is always around the corner, and you have to be ready for him. But that part of you that gets into conflict for what is best for you is trying to protect you from or provide you with. What are you trying to protect me from? What are you trying to provide me with? See, we don't want to get into war with our parts. It doesn't work. And so the more you can quietly, softly learn to examine the programming, right? Oftentimes for me, if I'm wanting a cinnamon roll, that's self-soothing. That's stress eating. I'm trying to find a way to regulate my state. What would the hero version of yourself do? Well, wouldn't be that. All right. Well, let's find something else. Do you all understand that? Does that make sense? Now, here's the thing. So much of what we practice and teach people, it requires you to slow down. And I'm reading this book right now, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's amazing. But hurry is violence to the soul. And we're in such a hurry to get to the next thing, we never stop and take the time to just observe and examine our own personal BS and make sure that we're making choices from the place that is that quiet observance, the awareness that sits behind all of it. So what I hope that you take away from this is, one, self-mastery can be achieved through metacognition. It can be achieved through mental hygiene and having a medicine cabinet of the mind. That's mastery, in my opinion. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life because, as Glennon Doyle said, it will direct every thought, every choice, and your perception, what you call reality. And what we need is a system and a process to unearth our unconscious. And that is the observation and examination of our behavior and our stories through the third chair, the non-judgmental observation, so that we can bring that unconscious into our awareness, into our conscious, and what you are aware of, you have choice in. And choice equals freedom. So thank you all for being here today. I trust that you will take this and practice this. We will put all of this today into the Facebook group so that you have it. And if there's anything that myself or my team can do, please make sure that you reach out to us. We'll be back here next week, same day, same time, for the habits of happiness. And I trust that you're going to have an amazing rest of your week. Live freedom. Bye-bye.